controversial to an extent.
Me too.
But one honorable mention I have to say is Cube. If you don't know what Cube is, it is a sci-fi movie that kind of is a early take on what the Saw movies did, to where these people get stuck in this to like a room that's a cube, and there's multiple rooms and there's traps and things, and I just remember being blown away when I did see this. Some of the effects and some of the things in it I just thought was an ingenious movie. My next honorable mention, and this is where it gets controversial, because hands down one of the greatest action movies, hands down probably the best movie of this year, and that is Face Off. It was really painful for me to not put this, but there were two movies that I actually put above Face Off. The first one is George of the Jungle. I know this is, but like I said, this is my list. It's personal to me. So whenever this movie came out, I was 11 years old, so I still had that like little kid mentality. And this movie came out, and it's just over the top, just cartoony, Tarzan-esque. And the reason that I had to mention it is because I can remember when this movie, a little bit after the movie came out, I got poison ivy really, really bad on my legs, to the point where I couldn't walk. And I remember this when I was looking through the list, and I remember, I can't remember if it was HBO, Showtime, what it was, but they were doing one of those free preview weekends or whatever, and I'm bedridden, I can't move, and George of the Jungle was the movie that played. And I remember my mom coming in to check on me in the morning, and she's like, "Oh, what are you watching?" I was like, "Oh, I'm watching George of the Jungle." She said I was laughing all day, and she would stop in. I literally watched that movie the entire day on repeat, laughing
funny.
the entire time. But once again, that wasn't the pick, because the movie that I did pick is one that I still watch today. I still hold in high regards. A lot of people might not agree with me, but I think that Con Air is my pick.
That's
100%, because I just love the story, the characters, Cyrus the Virus. I mean, you have Dave Chappelle as Pinball. Who can forget whenever they get Steve Buscemi's character,
Yep.
he comes and he's all, and they're like, "What the hell is that?" Like, just the story.
Yep.
All in all, like, that's the movie. From the very first time that I saw it, I just watched it probably like 2 weeks ago, and I still, like, it's gonna be one that I watch again and again. It's one that, like, if I don't know what else to watch, like, it's one that I can be like, you know what, I'll just throw that on, I'll be entertained. So.
Yeah. So for me, 97, like he said, Con Air. I think I would hold Face Off slightly above Con Air in terms of like what's the better movie. I think I like Face Off still a little bit better than Con Air, but it's very close. There was one I definitely need to throw out as an honorable mention for 97. That's Liar Liar with Jim Carrey. I loved that movie.
Goddamn pen is
Yeah. Starship Troopers, The Fifth Element, Austin Powers, Event Horizon, Anaconda, The Lost World, Jurassic Park. These are all movies I love that year. Now
I thought Starship Troopers was going to be your pick.
My pick, no one's going to agree with me on this. I know you certainly probably won't. I don't think you hate this movie, but you're going to be like, really? A lot of people shit on this movie. But I went back and I was really thinking in that year, what movie came out, was I extremely excited to see, went to see it, loved it, and watched it a bunch of times that year. Now, even though I was only 9 years old at this time, I was in the prime of me now just being obsessed with horror movies. So, horror movies, my favorite genre by far at this point in time in life. So, whenever a horror movie was coming out, that's what I was more excited for than even Disney movies, anything. So, there was one movie that had a great cast at that time because they were all very important 90s teen actors. Well, they were kind of like in their 20s at this point. And went to see it. Fell in love with the movie. I still love it to this day, but I know a lot of you probably don't, and that is I Know What You Did Last Summer. I was obsessed with the show Buffy the Vampire Slayer back then. Sarah Michelle Gellar's in this movie, Jennifer Love Hewitt, Freddie Prinze Jr., and Ryan Phillippe, and all these characters were big actors at the time, all in this, once again, we're in the craze of 90s teen slasher. And I just kept thinking, all these people are like main actors. Like, are any of them going to get killed off? Like, who's going to be the survivor here? And I love the story of them doing a hit and run on a guy, a fisherman. and they dump his body in the water, and they think that they're just going to get away with it. They're going to forget about it, and then a year later they all start getting these letters and stuff that someone knows what they did, and then it becomes a guessing game of who knows and who's the killer, and they all start getting killed off one by one. And I love this movie. Watching it in a theater, it was like when I left the theater, I remember thinking, "Man, this is one of my all-time favorite movies." Like at that time, of course, and then just watching it over and over again. It was my favorite horror movie that year, and I watched it more than anything else. So I had to pick it. So yeah, I know a lot of you are probably like, "Oh, that movie's okay," but yeah, do I still think it's one of the greatest horror movies overall? No, but in that year, I certainly did. So my pick, I know what you did last time.
All right, so 1998. This was another year that was hard for me, but for a different reason. It was hard because there were movies that like I enjoy, I think are amazing, but none of them really kind of had that like, boom, it's got to be that one, except for one.
Same here.
And
it was really
the initial.
Yeah.
And I had to stay with that, even though like I kept looking, and I mean, you can make an argument for The Big Lebowski. You can make an argument. At least I can.
See, I didn't watch that back then. Yeah. I love the movie now, but it wasn't even a consideration because I didn't watch it then.
And like I can make an argument from like it's not. Granted, I didn't watch it then, but looking at it as a year, I can make an argument for Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Mm-hmm. But when it really boils down to it, there's really only one movie, and that's Blade. Like you can't not say that Blade is the best of that year. Like little John Carter can't say that Blade wasn't the one. I mean, I love action movies, I love horror movies, I love vampires. I mean, it has all three. The story is incredible, it's not cheesy, it still holds up today. Granted, some of the effects aren't the greatest, but they're not like...
No, it's still really
I mean, it holds up. I mean, that's... For me, 98's gotta go to Blade.
Yeah, 98, I thought this was going to be really hard at first, but when I really looked at it, I mean, you had Urban Legend. I love that movie. Back Night at the Roxbury. I mean, that was a consideration. Can't Hardly Wait. I don't know if a lot of you have saw that movie, but I love that. Love that movie. Bride of Chucky came out that year. The Waterboy, The Faculty, Basketball, There's Something About Mary, Disturbing Behavior, Wild Things. These are all movies that were huge to me that year.
Basketball.
Came down to two movies. And the first movie I thought I was going to pick, until I really thought about it, was Halloween H2O. H2O was huge to me that year. It was the return of Michael Myers. Saw it at the drive-in. Loved it. But there was one movie I had to pick it because I was thinking about what movie did I watch over and over again, especially when it came out. And what movie was so big to me and my little brother that we actually made my mom film us with the handheld camera reenacting the movie. It was me, my buddy Cody, and my brother, and we reenacted the whole movie and made my mom film it. And that movie is Blade. Blade was the biggest movie for me that year. I didn't know anything about the comics or anything like that.
Yeah.
But when I watched the movie from the first scene, well, it's not the first scene, but the first time we see Blade at the rave where the vampires are doing the blood rave and he comes in and just starts kicking ass and chopping up vampires, I was so hooked. Wesley Snipes, I mean, that's, in my opinion, when you talk about, I don't know if many people consider Blade a superhero movie. It's in the Marvel Universe, though. I think he's the most underrated in terms of knocking a role out of the park.
Yeah.
Like everyone just immediately says, Iron Man, Robert Downey Jr., or Captain America. But man, I'll put Blade, I put Wesley Snipes up there with any of them because I really can't picture anybody else playing Blade than Wesley Snipes. I know they're supposed to remake it and somebody else is going to be playing the role, but man, that movie was so fun, from how cool the vampires look to Chris Christopherson as Whistler, and Frost.
Yeah.
Once again, I think one of the most underrated villains in a movie too. Just Stephen Dorff blew it out of the water, and I love that movie. I love the whole Blade trilogy. I know the third one gets shit on a lot, but I still enjoy that movie too. The first one's definitely the best, but yeah, that year, me, my brother, my buddy, we watched Blade over and over again, reenacted it. Had to pick it. Did you? I was kind of thinking you were going to go with Blade. When I was trying to think what you would pick, did you think I was going to go with Blade?
Yeah, I kind of figured that you were too. All right, so 1999. This one, it was another kind of tricky one for me. Honorable mention is going to be The Mummy with Brendan Fraser. Just a fun, campy, over-the-top, action, semi-horror movie. I just thought they did a really good job with that. Another honorable mention is going to be Fight Club. I mean, Edward Norton, Brad Pitt, story adapted by a novel by Chuck Palahniuk. I mean, you can't go wrong there. Also, Edward Norton is probably my all-time favorite actor, so I mean, I had to bring that up.
Yeah.
But the movie that I feel I watched more than any of the other ones, and the movie that I hold dear and still holds up today, is gonna be The Boondock Saints. I just feel that like it was such an original kind of story, the acting in it, the overall like comedic parts of it, just all around, just an amazing action drama movie. I when I was looking at the year, like that was the one that just kept popping out, and I was like, you know what, I have to go with The Boondock Saints.
This was a tough one. Just to name off movies that came out that year, and all these movies I'm naming off are movies that were big to me. Idle Hands, huge one for me. Teaching Mrs. Tingle, a lot of you may not have heard of that movie, but I loved that movie that year when it came out. Star Wars Episode 1, I know a lot of you are going to go, oh, what? That movie sucks, but it was big to me that year. The Sixth Sense, that movie scared the crap out of me the first time I saw it. Office Space, Cruel Intentions, the South Park movie, Sleepy Hollow, Austin Powers Part 2, Big Daddy, The Mummy, like he mentioned, Fight Club, The Green Mile. These were all huge movies. Now, there were two movies I was considering, and I had one written down, but then I remembered I didn't actually watch this movie the year it came out. I didn't see it till the year after. So I was like, I guess I better go with the other one. The movie I had written down, which is still one of my favorite movies to this day, and I would put it in my top 3 comedies of all time, and that's American Pie. American Pie has some of the most memorable characters of all time. I was definitely too young to be watching that movie when I did, and I think that movie introduced a lot of us to adult themes to prepare us for, our teenage years and stuff. But how can you not love American Pie, even if you're think it is kind of like gross out or adult? It's just such a hilarious movie with so many memorable moments. But I didn't pick it because I didn't see American Pie until the next year. The movie I picked, and then when I really thought about it, I was like, all right, this is a no-brainer. As everyone knows, my favorite movie of all time is Jaws. I love creature flicks, and I love killer shark movies. And Deep Blue Sea came out in 1999. And quick story about Deep Blue Sea. Another huge movie came out that year, Blair Witch Project, which is a movie I respect, but I don't like.
Yeah.
I was so excited to go see Blair Witch Project, as was everyone else that went to see it, because of the reviews it was getting and how people were saying it was the scariest thing ever made. My mom took me and my brother to see it. Midway through, me and my mom looked at each other and were like, man, I hope this gets better. And when it came to an end, we looked at each other and we were like, what a disappointment. Like, what the heck? Like, right when something good was going to happen, the movie ended. And we were so disappointed that when we were walking out, I wanted to see Deep Blue Sea. And there was a big cardboard cutout of the shark in the movie poster. And I said, Mom, can we please go see Deep Blue Sea? And she's like, no, we just saw Blair Witch. And I'm like, please. And she looked at the times and it was playing in the next 10 minutes. And she's like, all right. So she takes us back in. We go see Deep Blue Sea. And I was blown away by it. It's still probably, outside of Jaws, my second favorite shark movie of all time. I know some people think it's over the top. And of course, a lot of the CGI doesn't hold up very well today. But man, after coming out of that movie, that's the only thing I could think about for weeks was I got to see this again. And when it came out, I watched it over and over. How can you not like Deep Blue Sea? Some of the coolest shark deaths of all time. Great cast: Thomas Jane, Samuel L. Jackson, LL Cool J. His death scene right off the bat
is the most iconic one to me.
That and Michael Rappaport in that movie, he has the famous line, "Who are you going to trust?" And that part when the shark comes up and just from behind and oh man, such an intense, fun movie, and a good mix of CGI, and they use practical effects in that movie too. LL Cool J does an awesome job in that movie with his role. I love him and his bird. That just such an intense movie from start to finish. Definitely Deep Blue Sea was my favorite movie of 1999.
I can agree with that. Alright, so 2000, I'm just going to go right off the bat and say that the best movie of this year was not my pick, but it is a huge honorable mention.
Can I guess it? Can I guess it? I think I can guess
You're not going to guess it, but you can try. It's not what you're
well then you know what, I don't maybe it's your pick then. I was gonna say, just based off of, I was thinking that you were gonna say that the best movie of that
Oh,
year
alright. Yeah, go ahead.
is Gladiator.
Yeah. Hands down, the best movie is Gladiator.
That's what I was.
See, I thought you were going to guess my pick.
No,
You
best movie
won't
of the
be
year.
able to pick this
No,
one.
no.
So, other honorable mentions are going to be Snatch. I mean, Brad Pitt in that, and just the overall story. It's just driven by dialogue and story. There's not a whole lot of action. It's a movie that just grips you, and it just, like, you just go on the ride. Battle Royale is another one that I could not
Never saw
mention. It's one that I told him to watch.
You told me to. Yeah.
It is a Japanese movie. It basically, what it is these Japanese students, they get put on this island. They have these callers that have grenades, and basically, I mean, you guys, it is 2020. You know what Battle Royale is. That's literally what this is. They have to fight to basically survive. And like, it's literally like the games that you're probably playing. There's packs that they have to find. You might open a pack and it might have like a frying pan and a bandage. The next person opens it up and there's a assault rifle. Like, and then the next one has like a katana. So like, it does give you that like actual like.
Now, is there any is there any information, like, did Hunger Games get any, do you know, like, of their inspiration
that I'm
from
not
it?
sure, but
Okay.
I would be surprised if they didn't.
Yeah,
honestly,
because it sounds like
Yeah. And then another one that I have to mention is Memento. Just an amazing, once again,
cool
just story, original, just amazing movie. But the one that I had to pick, because this is a movie that really sat with me for a while after watching it, and every time I watch it, it just kind of gets to your core because of like the subject matter and how they do it, and that is Requiem for a Dream. Hands down, one of the greatest movies ever made. There are some very graphic scenes in it, and basically the movie is about, it follows 4 different people, 2 best friends, and the one best friend's girlfriend, and the one guy's mother. It is a movie about the atrocity of drug addiction and how it affects different people in different ways, and you follow each 4 people and how it affects them and the road that it takes them down. And like I said, it's just an amazing dramatic movie. It does have Jared Leto, who destroys it, and it also has
in a good way, you mean?
Yeah. Yeah, and it also has Marlon Wayans in it as his best friend, and it's just, like I said, it sits with you. It's just such an amazing movie. Like, I could not go with anything else other than that.
Yeah, for this year, I mean, you had really good ones. Little Nicky comes to mind. I like that movie. You had Castaway, Dracula 2000, which I liked back then, seeing it in theaters. Mission Impossible 2. Hollow Man, I have to mention. I really enjoyed that movie. I remember seeing that in theaters and really loving it. There were 2 movies, once again, it came down to for me. One, because I'm such a big wrestling fan, is the movie Ready to Rumble with David Arquette.
I forgot about that one.
I watched that a lot and love that movie. I still love that movie today. Jimmy King, and Wakey Wakey, hands off Snakey. That was a line I used to say a lot. But the movie I went with is a movie I didn't even see it in theaters. And there's my dog Emma clawing at the door, if you hear that. But it was a movie that when it came out, rented it, watched it in my living room in the daylight, and became obsessed with it, and thought it was one of the coolest, most original horror movie concepts ever made. Obviously, it spawned a ton of sequels, and that's Final Destination. Final Destination became my favorite movie that year. I watched it a bunch of times. The fact of, great cast, character named Alex, who on a plane has a vision that the plane's going to blow up and no one believes him, and it causes this fight on the plane, and him and other students get kicked off, and then when the plane takes up, it does blow up, and everyone thinks he's a freak, and the next thing you know, because he had this vision and intervened Death's plan, Death comes back after everyone that survived the plane crash and comes back to kill them in the order they would have died on the plane. And the creative ways that people die in this movie is bar none some of the coolest scenes ever. Like I said, it's a great cast, great cameo in it by Tony Todd. Just an awesome all-around movie, and Final Destination was one that I just kept recommending to everyone that year, and some great sequels spawned from it too. So yeah, I had to go with Final Destination for the year 2000.
I can agree with that. And one of the things I always loved about like Final Destination in general is the fact that like you have a villain, but you don't really have like it's
Yeah,
not your
you never
typical
see
like
it.
slasher. Like it's not Michael Myers. Like the villain is death.
Yeah.
But you just see how death kills them. It's not like a figurative interpretation. Like I'm glad they didn't put like some weird Grim Reaper.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
So,
I agree.
so now we're gonna go in 2001. This one was kind of hard, and I'm gonna say Blow was probably one of the best movies of that year. So I had to mention that. Joe Dirt. I mean, how can you talk about 2001 without mentioning Joe Dirt? Now we're getting to where it's a little tricky for me. This honorable mention, if it was the original, it would have been my pick. But unfortunately, the original came out in '85. Obviously, my list started at '86. So my main honorable mention in this category is probably the only anime that's on my list, and that is Vampire Hunter D Bloodlust. It is the sequel to Vampire Hunter D that came out in '85. Hands down, my all-time favorite anime movie. You have Vampire Hunter D, and he's just that. He is a vampire hunter, and he's trying to save the damsel in distress. Just an amazing, well done anime. Like I said, I couldn't pick the sequel, even though the sequel is amazing. It wasn't the original, and the movie that came out this year that I watched and I laughed from beginning to end. I can quote from beginning to end. I can still watch it to this day and laugh hysterically. This would also be in my top 5 greatest comedies of all time. That is Super Troopers. So, yeah, 2001, hands down, goes to Super Troopers.
Yeah, there were some good ones this year. American Pie 2, Lord of the Rings, Fast and Furious, one of the more underrated horror films, I think, to this day. Joyride,
Yeah.
Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, The Others, which has one of the best twist endings in horror movie history. I really enjoyed the horror movie Valentine, which a lot of people did not. But once again, just like many years, it came down to 2 movies for me. And I had one wrote down, and I changed it. And to be honest, I'm not sure if I should have changed it, but I'm going to leave it how it is. The movie I originally had written down was Jeepers Creepers. I mean, what an original concept. What an amazing story. Amazing cast. The Creeper, such a...
never came out.
Yeah, iconic role. It's the same director who did Clown House, unfortunately. But I changed it to another movie because there was another movie that I went and saw. My mom took me and a buddy to see, and my brother too. And the movie creeped me the hell out while watching it. I thought it had some of the best effects in a horror movie in terms of what the villains looked like, and such an original concept that when it came out to video later that year, I watched it so many times, and I still watch it to this day, and that is 13 Ghosts.
Yes.
13 Ghosts was such a cool movie, and I was obsessed with it that year. From the opening scene in the junkyard when they're trying to capture the ghost, and he just comes out and starts ripping people in half, slamming them on car hoods. If you've never seen 13 Ghosts, do yourself a favor, because this was in the heyday of the Dark Castle Pictures films that they used to come out with a release each year. I miss them. They were the Blumhouse of that day, and of that time. And this movie is about this guy who captures these ghosts, most of them very violent, malevolent spirits, and he's capturing them for a reason. He dies and leaves his fortune to his nephew, who has a family, who's struggling. He leaves him his house, which is this giant glass house mansion. They move in not knowing that all of these ghosts are trapped in these chambers in the basement. And they all, on this night when they're trapped in the house, these ghosts start getting released, and the only thing they can use to see them are these pair of glasses that allow you to see supernatural. I know it sounds like it's kind of weird, but it really works. You have a great cast. Matthew Lillard has an amazing role in this, and Tony Shalhoub plays the main character from the show Monk. I'm telling you.
Which fun little fact about me is probably one of my all-time favorite TV series.
Monk?
Was Monk.
It's a very underrated show. My grandparents love that show.
What are you trying to say?
But no, I liked it too. But no, it's hard pressed to find a movie. I think you'll agree with this that has cooler looking ghosts than in this movie. The design of the creature,
like the originality of it.
Yeah,
too. Like it's.
You've got the guy with the
him,
nails and bolts in his neck. You've got the big
with the cage
lady. I think it was called the Jackal.
Yeah, the Jackal.
That looks like kind of like a even more demented like witch. the torso, which is literally, they actually used an amputee for that role. A guy who, I mean, it's this mother and baby, but the baby's just this big, large man that has a bib and puke all over.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like the most demented things you can think of, but it works. And I tell you what, the first time you watch this movie, it's so intense. As each ghost gets released, you're like, oh my god, how are they going to survive this? And then there's a big twist ending. You know, I won't talk too much about it, but more about it. But yeah, 13 Ghosts was my favorite movie that year.
I agree with that. That's hands down one of the most underrated horror movies, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So, all right, we're on what, 2002?
2002.
All right, so whenever I initially started out doing 2002, I put Death to Smoochie down because I love that movie. You have Robin Williams and you have Edward Norton.
I've actually never watched it.
Yeah,
believe it or not.
And if you've never seen it, don't know what it is basically a dark comedy about children's shows. Edward Norton plays Smoochie, who's kind of like a Barney type children character, and he's pure and innocent. And you have Robin Williams, who's kind of the veteran child show star, Rainbow Randolph. He is kind of a twisted person about the money and that kind of thing. And it's about like the dark government of like the child show industry, and like it's just a really, really good twisted comedic movie. So I was like, that has to be it because I love this movie. It's one of my all-time favorites. But then I was like, wait a minute, my all-time favorite comedy came out this year too. I forgot that it came out in that same year, and when I saw that, I was like, I have to go with this. Like I said, this is my number one. If we were to do our top 10, top 5 comedic movies of all time, number one is Run Ronnie Run. It's one that a lot of people haven't like really seen or heard of. It's by David Cross and Bob Odenkirk. You might know them as stand-up comedians. Also, you might know them from they were on a sketch show called Mr. Show.
And Bob Odenkirk is from Better Call Saul.
Yeah.
He's in Breaking Bad.
Yep. Yeah. So Run Ronnie Run is basically about a redneck that has a knack at getting arrested, and Bob Odenkirk, his character is kind of like an inventor, and his crew are watching a cops like show, and Ronnie happens to be on it. One of them says, "This guy should have his own show. I'd watch this every week." So he decides he's gonna make a show based around Ronnie getting arrested different ways every single, and he becomes like the greatest reality show of that time, kicking out a survivor. So it's basically like a spoof of reality TV. You have every different type of reality TV to an extent is on this. It has so many different cameos. If you like stand up, it has like literally every stand-up comedian is in it. You have Matt Stone, Trey Parker is in it. John Stamos makes a cameo. Jack Black. There's literally so many different cameos. My only gripe, it still is my all-time favorite comedy, but unfortunately, like literally the first like 95% of the movie is incredible. The ending is a little rushed. It works, but to me, that's my only gripe. But I still like. I quote this movie, like I literally can watch this like over. It's another one I can watch over and over, watch it anytime, and just it's one that I've recommended to a lot of people. It's one that I recommend all the time. I've yet to have someone come back and be like, "Why the hell did you have me watch this?" Yeah. It's always they come back, they're like, "Dude, that was the funniest shit ever." Like that movie, like how did I not ever like hear about this? Because it was kind of like a limited release, didn't really get that much when it first came out, but once again, it's one of those that kind of picked up a cult like following. And once again, the only reason I ever watched it because in 2002 I was still working at Hollywood Video, and you could rent movies at Hollywood Video as an employee for whatever. And I saw the case, I was like, sure, I'll watch that, whatever. And literally,
yeah, I got to check that one out for sure. You've talked about it ever since we met.
Yeah.
2002 had some good ones. Blade 2, Eight-Legged Freaks. I've always enjoyed the movie. Swim Fan. You had The Ring, Austin Powers and Goldmember, The Scorpion King.
The Rock is a giant scorpion.
Yes. I thought the movie I was going to pick was 8 Mile, because I was a huge Eminem fan back then, as a lot of people were. And even if you're not like an Eminem fan,
it's a solid movie.
or
I
you're
don't
not
care
a
what
rap
you say.
fan
Like,
of rap,
it's a good drama. Like,
it's a
really...
great, like, even though it's dark and can be depressing, it is a good feel-good movie. And I don't care what anyone says, the rap battle at the end is
incredible.
Intense. It's
Yeah,
one of those like biggest hype moments in movie history. So I thought I was going to go with 8 Mile. But I think 8 Mile kind of, even in the years that follow, kind of grew on me more after. But there was something that I was so hyped for in 2002 that, and then seeing it in theaters, I was a little bit disappointed because it wasn't exactly what I wanted it to be, but I still loved it. And then when it came out, I watched it more than I did 8 Mile in that year. And that is the movie that was based off my favorite video game of all time, and that's Resident Evil. When I heard they were making a Resident Evil movie, oh my, I was like a kid in a candy store. I was just so excited. The reason I was a little disappointed is because I thought it was going to be just like what the first video game was, in a mansion trapped with creatures, but it was something different, not even the same characters. But it's still a really fun movie, the first one, and I loved it back then. And I watched it so much because it was my favorite video game. And the first one I still think is probably the best out of the whole series
definitely.
of them. The second one I really love too, but I think the first one's definitely the best.
And how do you feel after the second one? I
They
feel
went
like
downhill.
they really like...
The third one is still decent, but then after that, I just after that, each of them have like cool scenes or moments, but the overall storyline is just way too like more sci-fi than horror. And I felt like they made Mila Jovovich's character of Alice way too much the focus and got away from what Resident Evil is. But that first movie was the biggest movie that year for me as a Resident Evil fan. 8 Mile came close in second, but yeah, I got to go to Resident Evil.
Yeah, I can agree with that. All right, so 2003. My first honorable mention is going to be Kill Bill. I'm a huge Quentin Tarantino fan, but unfortunately, what this boiled down to is 2003 was kind of the year of Christmas movies for me. So one was Bad Santa, the other was Elf, and I was like, which one? Like, because both of those movies with Home Alone are like my Christmas like trilogy. Those are the three movies that I watch for Christmas: Elf, Home Alone, Bad Santa. And it was really hard for me to kind of pick between the two. I went with Elf solely because, Bad Santa, I watch it, I find it hilarious. My wife really doesn't like it, so I don't have that. Like, she likes it, but it's not. She doesn't like it nearly as much as I do.
Shame. So
it's not one that I watch like with her, or it's not one that I watch with my nephews.
Yeah.
So the fact that like maybe in a couple years, I don't think my sister-in-law would really care for that. So Elf has more of a tie to me because I get to watch it with other people. Mm-hmm. So that's really the only reason I went with Elf, is because of that. I can really make an argument for either of them. So Elf is going to be my pick.
Yeah, 2003, you had Final Destination 2, which I really enjoyed. Kill Bill, like you mentioned. Elf, Holes. Wrong Turn, very underrated horror film. The Rundown.
I love The Rundown.
Dreamcatcher. Darkness Falls, another very underrated horror film. Freddy vs. Jason. It came down to two movies for me, like always, and I thought I was going to pick Bad Santa because I honestly may hold Bad Santa as the greatest comedy of all time, just based off of how, no matter how many times I watch it, I still laugh my ass off every single time. Like a lot of comedies that I hold in such high regard, even though I love them, like I said, American Pie's in my top 5. I don't laugh as much every time I watch American Pie, but for some reason, Bad Santa, it still gets me every time because Billy Bob Thornton is just so amazing in it, and Thurman Merman. I mean, but what's my favorite genre? Horror movies. What movies are my most hyped for than anything else? Horror movies. So what movie came out in 2003 that literally I was so excited to see, and I take a lot of shit for it because I say it's better than the original. He doesn't agree with me at all, but me, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake was my biggest movie of 2003. I love this movie. And trust me, I don't disrespect the original because I love the original, but this movie, I love the modernized version of it. I love the actors in it. I love how they made the family such a bigger focus. Arlie Ermey, the late Arlie Ermey, steals it with his
Yeah.
role too. Leatherface looks awesome. The scene in that movie when you first get to see Leatherface, where the old grandfather's pounding on the floor, and then all of a sudden the door swings open and he comes out, and I thought they killed it in that movie. Like I loved it. And when I saw it in theaters, I was so tense watching that movie. And when it came out, I just kept watching it. So for me, even though Bad Santa, I absolutely loved it. Didn't see that till like the end of the year. Texas Chainsaw was earlier on, and I got to watch it throughout the year, and I had to pick it. So yeah, for me in 2003, I got to go the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake.
All right. So 2004, Dodgeball was an amazing movie.
Mm-hmm.
Not my pick though, but it's one that I go back and I still find enjoyment in. The Incredibles was hard for me to not pick because I love animated movies. I love Disney Pixar, and I thought they did a really good job with The Incredibles. But my pick was kind of a no-brainer for me. Once again, I'm a huge comic book fan. So in 2004, Spider-Man 2 came out. This is in the Tobey Maguire era of Spider-Man, which I'm not the biggest fan of him as Spider-Man. They're not bad. They just made some huge mistakes in my opinion. Especially the third one was a piece of shit. First one, I didn't like what they did with Green Goblin. But what they did perfectly that I don't think they'll ever be able to top is Alfred Milana. I can't pronounce. I don't know how to pronounce his last name.
I've only saw the movie once or twice, so
the actor that plays Doc Ock was spot on. I thought that was incredible. They did the story of Peter Parker, his mentor being Dr. Octavius, who becomes obviously Doc Ock. They did an amazing job at that. The actor, Alfred whatever, who plays Doc Ock, knocked it out of the park. I don't think anyone can play Doc Ock better than he did. So like that's really why this one was my pick. My love for Spider-Man and just the portrayal of Doc Ock I thought was phenomenal.
yeah. So for 2004, you had Saw come out, which I didn't like. I don't even think I watched Saw till the following year, to be honest. You had The Grudge, the American version, Kill Bill Volume 2, Dodgeball, The Punisher, Shaun of the Dead, Team America, Resident Evil Apocalypse, Eurotrip. I love that movie. But for me, the movie that I had to pick, well, let me say this too, very underrated film that I almost considered, The Butterfly Effect. Love that movie. I know I'm not a big Ashton Kutcher fan, but I think this is one role that he did very well. And that movie, I loved watching it and watched it a few times that year. But the one I had to go with was the one I was the most hyped for and saw it in theater with a buddy of mine. We actually went back and saw it twice. I still don't think it's better than the original, but I think that Zack Snyder did such an amazing job with it, and that is the Dawn of the Dead remake. That movie that year was like the movie I wanted to see the most, and I still think it's a great movie. I think, even though I still think the original Dawn of the Dead's better just because of the nostalgia of it, I do think that the fast-running zombies are 10 times scarier.
Yeah.
And I love the character. I mean, Ving Rhames did awesome in this movie. He had a great cast. The opening, with the girl and the late main character and her husband waking up, and that little girl, they let her into the room, and she bites the husband, and then the wife runs outside, and the whole town just on like in flames and running crazy, and then she's got to escape, and she leads to the mall, and then you got the zombie baby, which was crazy in that. You had the cool scenes with them sniping on the roof people, and then the escape at the end on the bus. It's violent, it's gory, it's so much fun. I really love the Dawn of the Dead remake. I still don't think it gets the credit it deserves because a lot of people just really want to hold it to the original, but I think what they did in the remake was awesome. So yeah, for me, my favorite film of that year at that time was Dawn of the Dead.
You can see that. Alright, so 2005, once again, like always, came down to two movies. But real quick, I can't I have to mention The Devil's Rejects. Devil's Rejects and House of a Thousand Corpses I consider to be Rob Zombie's best movies. Other than that, I'm not a huge Rob Zombie as a horror director. A lot of people think that like some of his others are amazing, but to me, I can't get into his style of directing other than those two movies. So I had to at least mention that. Also, Sin City came out that year, which was a visual masterpiece. They did such a good job of adapting the comic book style into that movie, and you had huge name actors and actresses in it. They did such a good job with that movie.
My wife was so mad that we went to see that. She fell asleep halfway through it. She hated it. I loved it.
Yeah.
And afterwards, she was like, "I can't believe you made me go see it." She just did not get the
Sounds
movie
like
at
mine.
all.
Like I
but
tried to make her watch
it.
it. She was like, "I'm not finishing this." I was like, "All right."
Yeah, I loved it.
It's-
But yeah,
And then the two that I was going at, I was tossing back and forth. And honestly, looking at these two, I want to switch them, but I will keep them as they are. So the honorable mention, which is the one that I kind of want to switch, but I won't, is Green Street Hooligans. Green Street Hooligans is Elijah Wood. Plays an American journalist that drops out of school and goes and kind of lives with his sister who lives in England. Her husband happens to be the former leader of a football gang. And what I mean by football, we're talking soccer. And basically, he was the leader of like the number one football gang over there. His brother is the current leader of it, and Elijah Wood kind of falls in with them, and it's just such an amazing movie. Has one of the most dramatic, moving endings. The soundtrack to it, it was the movie that kind of gave me a true appreciation for Elijah Wood as an actor.
Why is it
not
that-
just Lord of the Rings?
you notice everything that he's in is good. If
Yeah.
you really look back,
Yeah,
every movie he's in, like I'd be pressed to just go, you know what? Here's an Elijah Wood movie that sucks. Like if you think about
yeah,
it,
there's
every
some
movie
that
he's
are
in is
like
good.
amazing, but then they're all like at least decent
Good,
movies.
yeah.
They're
Even
not,
going back to like The Good Son
Yeah,
when he
The
was
Good
young
Son,
with
yeah.
Macaulay Culkin and like The Faculty. Like
Yeah.
every movie he's in is fun.
And he's in another one of my favorite TV series that I wish didn't end as quickly as it did.
Yeah, it's a
Wilfred.
shame, yeah.
Like that was such an
That was a fun
original
show.
so funny. Like
That show's like gets forgot about, but it was
Yeah.
a good show. Yeah.
So yeah, that was, like I said, that's really kind of the one I want to go with. But the one that's on my paper for my pick is a Nicolas Cage movie. It is my all-time favorite Nicolas Cage movie, and that is Lord of War. Lord of War is basically a true story biopic type movie about one of the most infamous gun runners, and it basically just tells his story of how he became a gun runner. It's another movie that stars Jared Leto before he ruined the Joker. He does a good job in it, and just the way that they shoot the movie, they tell the story, and some of the like little punches to the U.S. government type thing in the movie. This is one of my all-time favorite movies, and that's kind of why I picked it. But like I said, it's more honestly Green Street Hooligans for this year, but I did write Lord of War down.
Lord of War is good, but the fact that you say that's the best Cage movie and not The Wicker Man, what? No. So 2005, this was pretty easy for me, but there were some good ones that year. Star Wars Episode 3, the Amityville Horror remake. I know a lot of people don't like that, but I really love that movie.
You just like Ryan Reynolds shirtless. Let's get honest.
Just lost myself here. Yes, you said The Devil's Rejects, Saw 2, and what made it a little difficult is there's two great comedies that year. One I will put in my top 5 comedies all time, just like I said with American Pie and Bad Santa. The other one I wouldn't put in my top 5, but it's pretty close. The one that I wouldn't put in my top 5 that you can never make today is The Ringer.
Yeah.
Such an underrated comedy, like Johnny Knoxville in that movie. I mean, that movie's just hilarious. But the other movie that
When the fuck we get ice cream? I don't know why that's the
That-
scene.
that- yep,
Like,
yep.
I literally still
That's
to this
what I
day
was
when I
thinking in
watch
my
it,
head.
I laugh like
Yep.
hysterically every
I
single
was
time.
thinking that in my head as I'm saying. The one I would put in my top 5 comedies of all time is Wedding Crashers.
Yeah.
I love that movie from start to finish. That would be the movie my wife would pick for this year. And if it wasn't for one other movie, I would pick Wedding Crashers. But the movie I had to pick is a movie that I rewatch every single year, And I know a lot of you are gonna not agree with me on this because I don't know why this movie gets hate, man. Because I love it, and that is War of the Worlds. Um, this is probably my all-time favorite alien invasion film, even over Independence Day. I think. I mean, I know a lot of people aren't fans of Tom Cruise. Look, the guy outside of movies seems like a wacko, and the whole Scientology thing and all that. I'm not like I don't care anything about Tom Cruise the person, but I like Tom Cruise the actor, and I think he does an amazing job in this. Dakota Fanning as a child does an amazing job. The guy who plays his son in the movie. The setup to this movie, I think, is phenomenal. When that first alien ship comes up out of the ground, and that ever so terrifying noise that the ships make whenever they're coming, that you know, and just that first scene when you don't know what's going to happen, and all of a sudden that ship just starts vaporizing people and turning them to ash, and Tom Cruise runs back to his house all covered in ash, and then he's got to take his family, escape the city, and you have just these amazing scenes like when they're on the boat trying to escape, and the one comes up from the water and it's just using its tentacles to pull people out. Then they hide in the house with crazy ass Tim Robbins who thinks that like everyone needs to die, and Tom Cruise is faced with killing this guy to save his family. And then the finale, and I think I know obviously they got this from the story of War of the Worlds, but I still think it's one of the most clever endings of all time, especially for an extraterrestrial movie, of how would the aliens be defeated when they're so far advanced. And the ending they come up with, which I won't spoil, even though I know I just spoiled most of the movie, I won't spoil the ending just in case you haven't seen it, but the ending is so clever because in reality that's probably what would kill the aliens, because it makes sense. And I love this movie. It's still got great CGI that holds up. I love the way the aliens look, and just the cast, you care about them so much. I don't know why this movie got a bad rap. I mean, it made tons of money, and a lot of people do love it, but if you read reviews, it's like all over the board. I don't know if I ever asked you what you thought of the film, but I love it.
I like the original. It's one of those, like, I think the reason it gets so much shit is because
I think people don't like Tom Cruise.
Well, that is because, like, the original. You know what I mean? But it's
still,
like that. It's one that they should, like. I understand why they made it with better technology, but it didn't need to be. It should have been left what it was.
Yeah, see,
I
love it.
I like it, but I
watch it every year. But yeah, that's my 2005 War of the Worlds.
Right. So 2006 was kind of a little tricky. There really wasn't any that like kind of jumped out. Like like I hold like a emotional tie to. So I went with what movie that I thought was the most entertaining, the one that I would watch again, the one that I thought was, in my opinion, the best of that year. I did put Silent Hill as an honorable mention. I think that is the best game adaptation movie, even over the first Resident Evil, just because of how, no, I wouldn't say accurate they were to the game, but how they shot the movie was so accurate to how the game was, where they did a lot of the over-the-head camera angles. I just thought the movie was brilliantly and beautifully shot, and overall the character design of how they fleshed out the nurses, Pyramid Head, and everything was just incredible. Also, another honorable mention is Running Scared. This is a movie that I feel is underrated as like a drama with Paul Walker. Just a non-stop, in-your-face movie from beginning to end. Just some crazy twists, turns. You don't know what's going to happen next. And it has one of the most, like, in my opinion, infamous scenes of how, like, that situation would really play out. I'm not going to get into it if you haven't seen it. I highly recommend it. But there's a scene that, like, when it ends, you're like, yeah, that's how you do that scene. That's what would really happen. They don't sugarcoat and tiptoe around it. They right in your face. Like, so the movie I did pick is Lucky Number 11. I just thought this was such an original like take on kind of the gangster movie, and it stars Josh Hartnett, and he's an actor that I don't feel gets enough like credit. He had like a renaissance of like the movie, like he was like the go-to actor. I mean, 30 Days of Night was probably one of his best, but this one I thought was his best performance. And basically, it's one of those ones that like it has an incredible twist ending. You have Morgan Freeman, Bill Kingsley playing two mob bosses that literally their headquarters are across the street from each other, and they don't leave their top penthouse, and like they basically stand in their window and they can see each other.
Yeah.
And like it's just all around just an original, crazy, and like the way, once again, the way they shot it, the crazy camera like cuts, and the story of Bruce Willis, who plays like the top dog hitman assassin, and there's just so many different levels and things that just keep happening, and it just keeps you guessing and guessing, and it's not one that like, oh, another twist, and it doesn't pay off. Like it literally, you get done watching, you're like, wow, that was a beautiful piece of like filmography. Like that was so.
Yeah, that's a cool movie for sure. I never like held it up really high. I've only seen it a few times, but I definitely think it's a fun movie. So for 2006, some of the movies that meant most to me: The Departed, Click, The Hills Have Eyes remake, which is one of the most underrated remakes in my opinion, Slither, Clerks 2, Grandma's Boy. Oh man, I used to love watching that with my friends. The Covenant, Ricky Bobby came out that year. But for me, I told you guys, like, rounding up my top 5 comedies of all time, if I was like forced to put it on a spot, I know Bad Santa would be in there. Like I said, I know American Pie would be in there, Wedding Crashers. The movie that I had to pick for my favorite movie of 2006 is probably going to be the number 4 rounding out in there. And it's a movie that the second I saw it, I immediately I laughed so hard that I watched it again the next day, and then I immediately felt like I had to show all my friends the movie. So I was like taking it to all their houses, and that is Borat. Borat with Sacha Baron Cohen. That movie made me laugh so hard, and like for the next like month or two, it was like all I wanted to watch that year, because it's just like hysterical. And just like Bad Santa, it's one of those movies that even though I've seen it so many times, when I watch it, I still laugh each time. Just like his accent, and just like how over the top he is, and just how insane that movie gets. Is this cheese? And it's just so good. Yeah, I love Borat. It's actually been a few years since I've watched it, so I'm kind of, and now talking about it makes me want to revisit it. But yeah, me and my friends, we quoted that movie the whole year. Like everything was Borat after that. Like everywhere we went, you'll never get this, you'll never get this, which is something he said. Like we just, if we were at Walmart or the mall, we were talking like Borat. There was a funny night, time me and my friends, we all went down to Station Square, and we were just walking around, and we had this bet going to see who would not stop talking like Borat the entire night. So the rules were you had to talk like Borat. So when we went out to eat, to the waitress, any people that we talked to at Station Square, if you stopped talking like Borat, you lost. And we all talked like him. None of us lost. We did it the whole night. Everyone we came into contact with, people were laughing because that's all we talked like. I think we even... Did we end up going to a pirate game? No, we were just hanging outside PNC Park. There was a pirate game going on, and people were standing there chanting and stuff, and we're just sitting there talking like Borat. It was hilarious. But yeah, 2006, I got to pick Borat, and that's probably one of my top 5 favorite comedies of all time.
All right. I was never a big fan.
Really? Oh, wow.
So, all right. So 2007 is going to be the one that shocks him the most, because I can guarantee he thought that I was going to pick Trick or Treat, which I didn't. That is my honorable mention. It's my number 1 honorable mention. The other one that I do want to mention, I talked about a little bit, was 30 Days of Night. I mean, that is probably one of the greatest original vampire movies and or comic book series to ever come out.
Yep.
But the one that I picked, which is going to be kind of controversial, kind of shocking to Cameron here, my pick is Shoot 'Em Up. The reason being is, so I love horror movies, I love over-the-top action movies, and you want to talk about the greatest over-the-top action movie to ever come out is Shoot 'Em Up. From the beginning to the end, death scenes with carrots, just cheesy one-liners, just and like the crazy thing is, it has an amazing story that's kind of like buried under this craziness. So if you really look at even the story that's being told is incredible. And then one of my all-time favorite actors is in it, and he plays an amazing character. Paul Giamatti, his character in it is incredible. So like Shoot 'Em Up, I hold is probably in my top 5 greatest action movies of all time. So when I saw that that was this year, and I was kind of looking at some of the other ones, yeah, I love Trick or Treat, but when it comes down to it, like Trick or Treat's one that like I really only watch at Halloween. It's kind of like a Halloween tradition. It's not one that it's like, I don't know, February. I'm like, I'm gonna watch Trick or Treat.
Yeah.
I like Shoot 'Em Up. I'm like, oh, I want to have some fun. Like that's the one that it's one of my main go-to movies.
So for me, just to name off a few in 2007, Zodiac, 1408. 30 Days a Night, the Hitcher remake, which a lot of people hated that movie. I really enjoyed it. The Grindhouse double feature, Disturbia, Rob Zombie's Halloween. But for me, there were 2 movies that year. The one I almost picked, and which I'm surprised. I thought for a second this might be yours, is The Mist. Such a good movie, and just that ending alone. We've talked about it in other videos. If we ever do a countdown of the most shocking endings, it might be our number 1.
Yeah, I mean,
it's up there at least. You know, I almost picked it, but
I mean, like, hands down, that is the most shocking ending. I mean,
yeah, for
I don't
sure.
even have to think about it.
So, but for me though, you guys are learning a lot about my favorite comedies of all time. There's a comedy that came out this year that it might be my number 1. You know, I brought up Bad Santa, American Pie, and the other few I talked about, Wedding Crashers and Borat. But this is probably my number 1. It's a movie, I didn't see it in theaters because the preview didn't really look funny to me. But I remember I was sick when it came out. I can't remember if I had the flu or something. I was laying in bed and my mom was going to the video store, and she's like, "Do you want me to rent you something?" And I said, "Yeah." And she called me from the video store and she was telling me what the new releases are. And I was like, just grab this movie. I put it in. Within the first 10 minutes, I was laughing so hard that I forgot I was sick. And for the whole movie, I laughed so hard that my mom came in the room to see if I was okay. And it was in one of those movies that I literally kept rewatching. My dad's not really big into like these type of movies, these type of comedies, but I remember I showed it to him and he laughed hysterically. It's one of my wife's favorite movies of all time as well, and that is Superbad. Superbad might be my all-time favorite comedy. Just the dialogue between Seth Rogen and I'm drawing a blank on the other 2 actors who played McLovin and Evan, but I forget. But the dialogue between the 3 of them and how they make fun of McLovin and how just corny he is but hysterical. You got Seth Rogen and what's his name is the other cop.
It's been so long.
Oh, geez. Man, I'm having a brain freeze now. From the show Barry and from It Chapter 2.
Yeah.
Bill Hader.
Yeah, Bill Hader.
Jeez. And the adventure they're on to get to this party and that, and to score the alcohol. Man, this movie is just so funny to me, and it's the movie I remember most from that year, and I still watch it every year. So yeah, Superbad I had to pick. I love The Mist that year, but Superbad was the movie I watched the most, and it might be my favorite comedy of all time. I'd really have to think about it, but it's sure as heck is up there. So I got to pick Superbad for 2007.